How's everyone doing? Everyone nice and caffeinated, awake this morning? Hopefully staying a little bit dry given all this crazy weather. I want to welcome you to this session. So reimagining the financial management workforce, before I introduce our panelists here, sort of the impetus behind this session was actually we recently authored an article, and the impetus behind that was the financial management community over the last particularly 4 or 5 years has evolved drastically. Particularly with some of these emerging technologies, RPA, IA, data analytics, blockchain, all of these things. And there's all of these capabilities that are being brought into the CFO community. And so we've shifted from being this maybe perhaps traditional accounting and budget community to people who are multidimensional and fluid and willing to learn and take on new things and exploratory. And so that was sort of what led to this article and then to this session. And so the very amazing people that I am really honored and humbled to be up here with today have a particular passion around their people. They come from different walks in the community, not just the CFO community, but all of them have supported in some function the CFO community, which gives them a particular passion around you all. So let me introduce them quick for you. To my left here, we have Mr. Leroy Larkins. There's really no introduction here. He braved hurting his leg to be here with everyone today because he loved this topic so much.
Yes,
that indeed. He is here. God help him, his wife. We got him here, and he's excited to be here.
Yes.
He is currently new position as the executive director of the franchise fund at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Recently transitioned from long title, but deputy assistant secretary for financial audit in the Office of Management for VA, where he was for quite some time. Very active in this community and very passionate about this. And to his left, we have Chi, who hates when I mess up her last name. So I'm not going to try it because I don't want to be embarrassed when she beats me up on stage. But, so she is at NASA. She is, she's a chief, or director of, financial systems office. And so really serving as the senior liaison between the CFO, and the systems worlds. And so particularly passionate about sort of this change in dynamic in the financial management workforce and how should be more collaborative across some of these practice areas. And then to her left, Amy Parker, who is now the Chief Learning Officer for the Department of Veterans Affairs, who has supported many FM communities, both in VA and DoD, and now in her new role is really embracing this title and reimagining what can be done with not just the FM community across the board, but she's got this particular passion for us. So really reshaping that.
Still love you, even though I'm not with you all the time now.
Awesome. So I do want to take a minute because I really can't speak highly enough of these three panelists. So I just want to take a minute to welcome them here.
Thank you.
So just to walk us through what we're going to be discussing today, so we're going to give you a little bit of an introduction, a viewpoint from our perspective on what the future of the FM community looks like. That kind of drives the next two sections, which are, so how do we get talent in the door? How are we attracting the right type of talent in this community? And then leading into the final section, which is, how do we get talent to stay? How do we retain people and do things in a manner that want people to stay working with us? And so what we're going to do in the next handful of slides is really present an approach to how to do that. What are some tools, some techniques, some things that we can take back to our organizations to support that? And I think going back to what Brett said earlier, our speaker, and I'll paraphrase, but he effectively said, as leaders, our purpose is to serve as a conduit or a vehicle to help people become heroes. So in order to do that, this again presents ways that we serve as that conduit. We serve as that vehicle so that people can become heroes in their organizations and can continue to build on themselves and better support the missions that we all support. So I'm going to kick it off over to Chi. Chi, what are your thoughts? What does the future of the financial management workforce look like? Not just for you, but what's it really turning into in the federal government?
In the federal government, I see the future of the federal financial management workforce really being agile, where we're seeing in our lives around us an untethering. And I think the same thing is happening with our workforce, where we're seeing virtual applications. We're physically removing ourselves from brick and mortar. We're untethering from the things that used to tie us down. So I do see it being changing in agility, being able to quickly adopt rapidly emerging technology, but in a way that makes sense. It has to be a business need, business driven. You see it just the way in our regular lives, right? The way you bank. The way you bank's changed now than it was 10 years ago. There's still the foundations of banking there, but technology, mobile apps drive a different way for you to access your banking. I see the same thing happening in our environment, right? Where you're going to be able to use, like you said, different technologies like RPA, but still have the foundation of federal financial management. I like to say I keep my feet firmly planted in the foundation of financial management while my head is in the clouds, right? So we know that the future of our core financial systems will be soon cloud enabled. And so being able to make that transition or reach that technology enabled adaptation is going to be important while we're still staying in the foundation of what we do.
Yeah. And that's a great point. And I think one of those things that really drove some of this is, if we remember a couple of years ago, OMB Circular A123 drastically changed. For over a decade, it was very, for the most part, hardcore accounting, financial management, internal controls. And now it's evolved into include enterprise risk management, data integrity, things that we thought about as an FM community, but wasn't a core focus of the community. And so now we're having to respond to that and think about how we shift to support those changes. And so through that, one of the things we had chatted through was, how do we change the point in time that we really start attracting talent, and how do we actually go about that? It's a little bit different of a perspective in the government community. If you are a government employee, there's certain things we have to abide by, but that doesn't mean we can't start the process sooner. And so what does that look like if we're going to attract high value talent? So really what it comes down to is recruiting is an active thing. It's not passive. You don't identify talent when we have a need. We network at communities like this and say, okay, you know what? Amy, she does a great job. I may not have a role for her right now, but I'd love at some point for her to join our firm. When I have an organization or an opening, then I can say, hey, Amy, I got this job over here. I think you'd be a great fit. Would you like it? What are you passionate about? So what it really comes down to, and there's a couple of things on here, is that everyone is really involved in this process. So going back to your organizations, and there's limitations with putting it into any kind of performance plan, but really having people play a part, coming to community events like this, finding people who, when we have needs, we know they're vetted, they're awesome, they're talented, they have a passion, they share that passion. So we've got to be able to foster a community that shares that passion for networking as well. We have limited budgets. Not everyone can do it. Let's start fostering that. Ask people to go to these events, the happy hours, the AGA luncheons and seminars and conferences, and start building this database, right? So there are a lot of groups out there that now have a database of sorts. Excel, Access, doesn't matter. But have a sheet of people who we've interacted with, who, if we had the chance, we would encourage them to apply.
Hey, Sean, you know what I love about what you just said there?
Yes.
When we first chatted about this panel, we discussed the millennial in the room.
Yeah.
And we all know...
That being me.
We all know that even with what she was saying, we're all so much more connected right now. And you're describing establishing connectedness. That just like you're saying, we're untethering, we're going to start interacting, our world becomes much more virtual, and and establishing the connectedness is what's so important for attracting high value talent, because you've made those inroads already.
Yeah. And so a great example, because I think actually last year we had Tom Harker join, right? Tom is at Navy. They've got a little bit different of a structure because they've got an open authorization for hiring. But think about how he's approached it. That is sort of the epitome of what we should be doing, saying, I want you guys to work with us if you have a passion for it and you've got this desire. So come talk to us. Let me figure out what you're passionate about, and then we'll find a role for you, rather than the inverse of saying, I've got an opening. I've now got to go find people. I'm going to put it out on USA Jobs. Hopefully I get 4,200 candidates that I've got to whittle down and come to a conclusion on who would be a great fit, right? Encourage people to apply. Know who you're encouraging prior to that.
Well, even if you take it a step further, right? I mean, I talk about the fact that we are trying to create a culture, right? Not only of trying to find the candidates themselves, but actually have a place where they want to come and work, right? My poor football organization right now is going through what is called a change in culture, right? So that people will want to play football there, right? And so in a lot of ways, we have to do that in our own organizations. We have to be able to create a culture where people are attracted to say, hey, you know, if I'm looking for something, if I'm at these events and things like that, what makes me want to come work for VA? What makes me want to come work for NASA? And so on and so forth. And so literally, you got to be a place where people want to actually come to, because that's the other part of it. It's great to have these conversations, but if you have a crappy organization that's not being flexible, that's not being adaptable to the environment of what we see here, then guess what? You're not going to get the people there at all. So.
Yeah, Leroy, we hope that no one will hold it against us that we're local fans of the local team.
It's okay.
I was going to say, for the record,
born and bred here.
Are a crappy organization.
I did not say that.
You did not say that.
I said that we are looking
You would
to
never
the future.
say that.
We're not focused on the past. We're yes.
And we also talked about, you know, the promise of what it would mean to come work in a government organization.
Yes.
If what we're offering to the next generation of workforce, again, the big M in the room, there'll be 75% of our workforce in 15 years. You know, hey, come work for us. You can sit in this ugly brown cube for 25 years and then we'll shoo you out the door when it's time to retire. Thanks.
But that's a great point that you bring up, Amy, because I think the next topic, G, if you want to talk a little bit about what it's going to take for us is sort of reimagining our organizational structure, thinking outside of the box for what we need to do to facilitate this shift and to facilitate some of these activities. So did I do it? Okay. So maybe walk us through what does that look like? How do we go about doing that, whether it's at a very senior across the organizational level or bringing it down a step into our particular office or division to be able to facilitate that?
Sure. First, I just want to say I don't believe there's any crappy agencies.
That's right.
Government.
That's
No,
right.
there aren't.
And
There are bad cubes.
Right.
There are a lot of bad
There's
cubes.
some bad cubes. And I think I work for probably one of the coolest agencies in the federal government. I really do enjoy being at NASA, and I'm inspired personally by their mission. So I would say to that is making sure that we keep the work cool. Keep your mission at the focal point of what you're doing. You know, it's easy to think when someone retires or someone leaves, okay, I've got to fill that space. What we're saying is rethink that those roles, rethink those opportunities. Keep it cool. You know, would your kids want to work here? Would your kids' friends want to work there? You know, and we can do it with technologies, but it also takes you really providing that opportunity for different voices to come into a space where they maybe haven't. You know, get into working groups, find other opportunities, maybe outside of the core financial office, and leverage yourself with existing projects and find opportunities. If it doesn't work, that's okay. Be iterative. But if it does work, keep at it. So here we're talking about attracting high value talent. First, tap into the talent that you have available. You know, there's details, there's special projects. When you climb up the ladder, you can create any opportunity that you want to for staff that are promising.
Oh, wait, can you say that part again? Say that last statement. Well, people don't think about that.
Yeah.
Repeat that last statement.
It was off the top.
That you can create. Well, think about it. When you move up the ladder, you can create any opportunity that you want to support your people. We as leaders are vehicles to help create heroes.
Right. So it's difficult to think about, but the approach that I have is unplug yourself from the day-to-day work and tap back into the mission of your organization. What value does the VA have? You know, what does your organization do for the citizens and the taxpayers? And then reestablish that approach. And that's where you're going to find yourself driven or maybe not driven, passionate or maybe not passionate. But, you know, definitely get in a space where you can involve other voices, other people, other opportunities internally, and then from there take it externally. And then the second bullet here, stop putting employees in a box of tradition. And I'll just say, again, I do find comfort in the foundation of financial accounting, right? Financial accounting and budgeting. A lot of us do find comfort in that. That gives me a box. But I think the emerging technology and where IT is going gives me enough freedom to keep it young, keep it cool, keep it interesting, and have the opportunities for agility. So also find that. The things that are troubling, things that you've traditionally done and didn't work, those are probably your best opportunities to find new inventive ways to stay cool, stay relevant.
Yep. Yeah. And I think a great part, and maybe Leroy or Amy, you can speak to how you guys are facilitating this too. When we were talking through this, an example of that was, let's think through, right, 10 years ago when people were really knowledgeable in Excel. That was a huge selling point. If you knew how to do, macros were like mind-blowing. If you could do VLOOKUPs, right? That was interview question. Do you know how to do the VLOOKUPs? Yes? Cool. No? Okay. Right. Now it's analytics. Yeah. Do you know a technology that is far beyond Excel? So think about ways, if we're still using tools like that and people are passionate about analytics or RPA, how can we support them through that, through some of these innovative approaches to getting their job done that they need to get done, supporting with the things they want to do, maybe through this innovation, but improving how they're getting their job done. So
yeah, I mean, I think the key here is, as a leader, your job is to set a goal. And then try to put some type of milestones to try to get there, but then let everybody else kind of chart their path to get to each and every milestone. That autonomy gives people, the empowerment, right, to do their thing, right? Meaning I'm not saying that you have to do X, Y, and Z step in order to get here. No, I'm going to give you some latitude as long as you get there, but I'm going to give you some latitude to make that happen. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, Amy, if you're seeing that. So Amy at the VA as well, you're touching a far different community, right? It's not just FM. I mean, nurses, facilities, all of these other people. Yeah. Are there ways that you're seeing how that's approached too to support, doing what they have to do, but being innovative in how they're getting that done?
I'm going to borrow from a speech I heard the director of marketing at Amazon give to us, where he talked about the obsessive customer focus. And that's really where our approach starts on the learning journey, is to the individual, because learning is very personal. Training is maybe not. Training is maybe, people think, oh gosh, she's going to, talk philosophy about learning. Is it training or is it learning? But, learning more on the developmental and more about touching the passion of the person and getting to what they really want to become and to develop. So absolutely. Yeah, we're starting with that.
Awesome. And I think speaking of Amazon and kind of going into our next topic, we were inspired by a story that I heard of a friend of mine who was applying for a senior technology advisory role in the government and also applying simultaneously for a senior technology role at Amazon. And when we chatted about what led to his decision to ultimately go to Amazon, besides the paycheck, was the interview process. And so what he said was very interesting, and what changed his mind was when he met with the government agency he was applying to, they focused on what he had done in his career already. Cool. That's on paper. He said, what difference does that make? Because I could have made an impact over here. That doesn't mean I'm going to face and be able to help you with your challenges. When he went to Amazon, they didn't have his resume in front of him. They said, I don't care what your title was. I don't care what you've done in your life. Here's the things we're facing right now that are most critical. How would you solve these? And so he said when he got through that interview, He was so inspired, and they gave almost an immediate answer that says, wow, I can do that. That's what you want to know? Like, he brought, a big CV, 28 years of experience in technology. And that is what is leading to this next topic, is flipping the script on how we approach the interview process. And Leroy, if you can kind of lead us through how you started doing that.
Well, what's interesting is that, first off, I had to stop looking at HR as the enemy. I'm sorry, Amy. I apologize. So literally, I'd have this vision. I'd have this position in my mind about what I believed, we were trying to get to. And HR would be saying, no, this is what you can, what you can't do. So you got to really work closely with them to try to show them exactly what it is that you want, right? And then, just like Sean said, you got to flip the script in the interview process, in your communications with the candidates, and make things more solution oriented. Now, to me, experience is one of the factors that you'll use to try to determine whether or not they can do the job, but it's not the only factor, right? So literally what we've done in our interview process is have kind of challenged the individual by presenting them a real time problem that we're facing and say, hey, tell me how it is that you would resolve this. One of the most eye-opening experiences for me in an interview, and I learned more from the interview than probably I was supposed to. Literally, we talked about database structures. We talked about data analytics and how information can be utilized in different ways. Literally, the candidate got up and said, do you mind if I do something? I'm like, okay. He says, can I use your whiteboard? And so literally, he whiteboarded out the solution to the problem that we presented. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting there saying to myself, now this is the type of person that we want engaged at the VA, meaning somebody who is solution oriented. They can think through the problems, the challenges, show you kind of what's going on, and then you can just say, hey, execute it. We see it time and time again. I'll even ask for a writing sample from a candidate to, again, a real-time problem where they actually have to work through what it is that they would do. And at the time, we had these, major audit challenges. And so I picked a particular, audit challenges and say, hey, what would you do based on your experience and what you felt worked, and would work for VA, and literally got some really great answers. And so what that did was I was able to tap into the way that they would think if they were actually on the job. And so again, just try to flip the script on how you're looking at an individual and how you want them to be able to problem solve and how you would utilize them in your organization moving forward.
The best part about that is that if as adults, 70% of our learning is supposed to be experiential, then you could save yourselves a lot of money. You could stop mostly sending people to training classes. Yeah. You can give them real work problems and they're going to learn so much and be so much more invested. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And think about it just from and no one has to raise their hand on this, but how frequently someone is hired to fill a position of which that position inherently has a responsibility to solve some challenges, and someone comes in and you're like, gosh, I wish I would have picked someone different.
Yeah.
And now you've got to go, and there's no denying the challenges of terminating people in the federal government. It's not that easy. Right. So now we're stuck. So if we're proactively thinking about this and we're bringing on people who now have proven at some level they've got the capacity and the passion to solve problems, we eliminate a lot of our challenges in the future. And
you said it right. I mean, we have to be proactive in our thinking towards this. This is not something that you want to do after the fact, right? So that means you got to get ahead of it. What do you want to see out of the employee in the position that you're trying to hire? You have to know exactly what that is, because then it's not the employee's fault that you basically tried to fit, a round peg into a square hole. That's not their fault. You know what I'm saying? So literally, if you get ahead of the game, know what you want, and be able to kind of chart, that road and try to see that out of the candidates, then you're going to be a lot better off.
Yeah. And I think one of the last elements there is something that is important as well. And maybe just see a show of hands. We know it takes a little longer to hire some people sometimes. How often are we communicating with those potential candidates throughout the process? Or let's say, who has experienced where candidates have dropped off purely due to the duration of the hiring process? Has that been anyone experiencing that?
I've had that a couple times.
Yeah, quite a few times, right? So think about how much we could prevent that by the time we open a position to the time we're interviewing is calling the candidate. emailing them saying, hey, here's where we are in the process. We're still really excited. Hopefully you're excited. Still excited about having you potentially join. Here's where we are. Here's what to expect in the future. Manage some of those expectations, because there's a lot of times that people will purely drop off because they haven't heard in 60 days because of how long it takes sometimes. So think about that process.
Yeah, that starts to become an ego blow.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, yeah.
you know, do you have to wait 5 days to hear back from the match date?
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Did he wait 5 days? Why is he waiting?
Yeah.
You know? Doesn't like me.
And so I think that kind of gets into our next part of this phase, which is, okay, once people are on board, we can't just focus on getting them in. How do we make sure they stay? How are we engaging them? And Amy has really been in this new role particularly has been thinking through what's a framework, what's a structure to facilitate that process, that thinking that will then lead us in some of the rest of these topics. So Amy, if you want to walk through this lead model for us and what that means.
That this looks like a water drop that just went splat.
Is that a good thing? Is that a
That's
bad
what I
thing?
think.
Oh, okay.
That's what I see. I don't know. Maybe other people. I have a number for this wonderful group, this room full of numbers people. It's 94%. A recent LinkedIn learning study found that 94% of our employees would stay with a company. I can't imagine they wouldn't stay with a government agency too, if they believe that you are invested in their career. And I, comes with the title, believe that learning is a great way for us to show the opportunity for individuals to learn and develop in their position and beyond that is a great way to show that we're invested in their career. And so when we started working on the article a while back, I talked about 3 things. I can remember eggs, milk, and bread to go to the grocery store. So like a 3-pronged approach, so to speak, to encapsulate this a journey, a process, and really a way to serve the workforce. And we came up with an acronym LEAD to, some words that fit in nicely there. The first word, learning. Gotta love that. And really what is that about? The difference between train versus equip. So if you're trained to do something, you can do that skill. Learning is really, taking it in, I believe. It's about the internal process a little bit more. And it can be about concepts as opposed to, I went to cooking school, so they trained me how to chop things, right? So enhancement, which is about the skills that we all have that we want to be better at doing our job every day, specific to our functional areas where we work. And, in FM, we talk about, the rooting that she talked about, being grounded in those FM essentials. For advancement, for the A, we're talking about AI, we're talking about RPA, we're talking about the future of the workforce and how it is going to change. And I think 85% of CEOs said they believe that their whole workforce is going to need to be reskilled, upskilled in the next 5 years. Holy cow, how are we going to get that done with a workforce the size of the United States workforce? I don't know. That's huge. But the other piece of advancement is we know that there is always going to be the role for the human, because the robots can't replace us in the judgment necessarily. And so that's what, and the human interaction that we're going to have. And especially at the VA, where we're talking about, a sacred mission. Our employees feel that very keenly, I believe, to serve where the American people have given us this role to play. And finally, development. And this is my favorite part. This is, to me, about what is the ongoing, what again gets to the passion of the individual, and coaching and mentoring, which I love as an approach, opening up the genius of the individual. We have, all of you are leaders in your families, in your communities, in your private interests outside. So when you walk in the door, the idea that you would like set your head aside and now you need somebody to stand over you and tell you what to do, that's ridiculous. So I love coaching as an approach because it pulls forth the genius of the individual. And, it is a learning journey for, classic leaders. If you've been in other organizations where, you think the role as you become the boss is to tell people what to do. Coaching is really about, shutting up and listening to what what the genius of the individual is going to give to you. So we also talked about the servant. We have a leadership development framework now at the VA, which we're really excited about. The secretary has endorsed it. We're rolling it out department-wide this calendar year. By the end of the year, I want to know that every VA employee knows what they can access for development in the department, in their functional area and in leadership, because we are all leaders. But servant leadership especially, being self-aware. I use 3 things. It's all I can remember. To be self-aware is really a process. It's a journey, not a destination. You don't wake up one morning and go, self-aware, here I am, world. And it's about self-examination, which is sometimes not the most fun process, really, honestly. We also talk about serving others, but I call this the meat in the sandwich on the servant leadership to do. Sandwiched there between the 2 pieces of bread, because we, as servant leaders, we also need to balance results and relationships. We are given missions. We do have to deliver. We have to be good stewards. We have to we have to meet our goals. If you're a doormat, you're not going to get that done, right? If you're only putting others first. Also, it flips the organization upside down so that then the individual, not the mission, is the outcome. But as far as results go, if that's all you're focused on, you end up with a lot of people just kind of coming in, doing exactly what they have to do or what you might ask them to do. And the passion really goes away. So I think I covered the splat.
Yeah.
How'd I do it?
We'll call that the splat.
Okay.
But I think sort of the crux of that, sort of how we shift how, leaders think, how we think, is a point that you made earlier, which is sort of this customer-centric view. Mm-hmm. So has anyone worked in restaurants? Has anyone worked for tips? Restaurants, music, something where you had to make sure someone was really happy in order to get paid?
Yeah.
We have to kind of flip how we think about that. So it's similar. It's adopting this mentality that everyone that I touch in my organization, whether it's my boss, my employees, my counterparts, other people in the organization, other organizations are our customer. Yeah. And so how do we change that? And Leroy, if you can guide us through what that looks like to make sure that we're successful, because it is a big shift in our mindset.
Well, before you move the slide, I want to talk a little bit about this customer-centric view from this perspective. Because what we're trying to say is that our staff, our employees, the people we're trying to hire are our customers, meaning we want to see what it's going to take from them to actually be able to excel, right? So when I'm looking at splat, I guess that's not what we're calling it, right? Right. So what you're saying is you're starting off with the enhancement, meaning there is something that I see in you that adds value. There is some superhero values in you, okay? And that we're just going to enhance upon. We're going to build upon it, right? And so then that is going to be the key to what's going to be able to make you advance in the organization, right? And then you got to develop the gaps, right? Meaning if there's something that they're really, really great at, and maybe there's like 10% that's really not totally cutting the mustard, then that's what you want to concentrate or develop that particular thing. Because then you don't want to necessarily have a cookie cutter mentality about how you get a person to greatness, right? Because it's tailored towards that individual. And I think that's kind of what you see in the next slide, is that we're looking at this from an individual perspective, right? Analyzing, understanding your staff, understanding your employees, right? Figuring out what actually motivates them, what kind of brings them to work every day. We know full well that everybody is not motivated by money. I mean, there's something that else that is kind of keeping them grinding and keeping them going. And then what you want to do is match that thing that excites them, right, with where they need to go. Meaning, I've always said, if you show me the roadmap, right, kind of lay out the rules for me to figure out how to get there, then I can achieve greatness, right? I think the problem is that that road sometimes is a little vague, right? And so when people were asking people to do a whole lot of guesswork, well, I think I got to do this. I think I got to do that. I think I got to smooth up to this person. I think I got to do really well on only the higher end, most visible projects in order to obtain success. You got to be able to figure out what's going to work for that individual, because the beautiful part about this is that not everybody's trying to get to the top of the food chain, right? There are some people who are quite happy, being in the middle, right? But unless you have a conversation with that individual, unless you talk to them about what their aspirations are, what their career goals are, you wouldn't really know that. Because guess what? You're going to need to have some pretty good foot soldiers that'll carry this thing out. You're going to need to have some good middle managers. You're going to need someone aspiring to the top, because they're always pushing and always pulling to try to get there. But you got to understand that, and you can only get that by actually having conversations with your staff. One of the other things that I think we do rely a lot heavily on, at least in the VA, is this request feedback from employees. NASA over here, has
we're
this
not talking
great,
about them.
AES survey, all employees
Showing
survey,
off.
right? Yeah, basically, and they're like phenomenal, right? So, well, at VA we did not have that, for a very long time, and so literally that became a management objective from our secretary. And so much so is that he actually put an increase in your AES score in our performance plan. Well, guess what? That woke up everybody in the room as far as senior leaders were concerned and things like that. So they knew that they had to do something different, right? And so it put more of a focus on it, and then it made you engage more with your employees. It made you try to find out what was really wrong with them. You didn't just throw that survey away and say, oh, whatever, it's just someone being disgruntled. No, you actually took the time to try to understand that feedback. You had focus group sessions or whatever, so that by the time that AES came around next year, you saw a significant improvement in that. And that is what it means to actually treat your staff as customers. Find out what they want, find out what they need, and then deliver that in your organization.
Yeah, and I think it's not just about the customers. And I'll go back to the NASA analogy, because to be honest, when I joined NASA in 2008, I probably wasn't as excited about NASA as an organization as I am today. Okay. And it's something that grew on me and evolved with my understanding. NASA's always upfront about saying that, the people, our human capital is the biggest part of our mission. And you think about all the things, all the cool technology NASA has, you're like, the people are the most important. And it was when I took a center visit to Kennedy Space Center, yes. And I got to travel with our CFO, and they went into a designated space for the Challenger. And, I didn't even know what was going on. I, went in, it was a very locked room, and I got to see the remains of what NASA gathered after 3 years to bring back and recover everything from Challenger. And in that moment, I got it. Yep. I got it. So it's about value. In that moment, and hearing what they were telling our CFO about the importance of who you are and what you have to remember every day. I think that's something that NASA has different in the mission, and the centers that get that, the offices that understand their importance, maybe they do score higher on EVIAS. Maybe they do have a greater sense of fulfillment in the work that they do. So this understand what senior leadership seeks in future leaders. Senior leaders know the value. What do you really want beyond the PD? Beyond the title, the role, the cue, what do you really want? A lot of our senior leaders are leaving. And what do you want that person that's going to take over your job, your baby, all those projects that you started? What do you want that person to have? What's the value? And I think if we can get closer to that value and let those employees know that you value those who can fulfill that. That's right. I think that you'll see the change that we're making. It won't just be a customer. It'll be everyone. We'll see the business change, and we'll also see the employees that do the business change.
Well, that goes back to just understanding the goal, right? The mission of the organization, and being able to tap into that, at the grassroots level. Just like you said, going to see the Challenger was an eye-opening experience. for me, going out to a cemetery or going out to a VA hospital and actually touching a veteran that's there, thanking them for their service, actually finding out, their perspective from how we can make things better for them. It makes you just do your job so much better, especially from a financial background, which we don't really get to touch our customers all the time on a regular day-to-day basis. But when you're able to do that, you're right. It adds so much value to your job. And so we actually encourage that for our staff to get out there and see these things firsthand, because again, it does make you do your job a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you both really teed up this next topic, which is creating sort of this customized career success journey. And Chia, is there something, I think you guys went pretty well in depth into that. And so for time's sake, we have a lot of questions. I'd like to be at least to be able to answer one. Is there something else you think that's important from this customized career journey for people to understand that maybe we didn't discuss yet?
Again, I think it all ties in. Be flexible. Be flexible. There shouldn't be this new person or this new role has to do and have to go through everything that I went through. Have the ability to share your experiences and then enable new staff, new employees, new working groups, new methodologies, and enable them to be successful with your experiences. So again, that flexibility or agility in the mind frame. But I like everything that we've shared.
Yeah. And I think what it comes down to as a potential output is literally a document that says, here's sort of the core competencies we want to see at various levels along your journey. What do you want to make out of that? We're going to put a plan into place to make sure that happens. But again, that's at least meeting the organization's goals, but it's doing it in a way that is meaningful for each employee, not saying it's cookie cutter across.
Well, I love that too, because we talk about on our framework, our leadership development framework, which is like a stair step that, how you grow up in life, right? You have the growing pains and you're going vertical, but then there's a point in time in life, maybe some of you have experienced this, midlife, where you start to kind of maybe grow out a little bit too. Shocking part of your 40s.
Yeah,
really unfortunate.
I can attest to that.
And so we talk about that, staying in place is actually some really great learning can go on there. And that's how you develop a deep knowledge set that, you become a subject matter expert. It's not by keep popping up the ladder, so to speak, keep going. As you were saying, Leroy, it's really about, you find people that, they fall in love with what they're doing and they just want to be the best in the organization doing it. And then they can become the people that bring others along with them and impart that knowledge. We shouldn't look down on that. We shouldn't forget about those people at all. And I think that there has been a propensity to do that, in the past. We're really moving away from that in VA.
Yeah. And I think one thing that you mentioned on it and kind of speaks to this next slide earlier, gosh, that is bright.
That is bright.
Yes,
Who can read that?
It's not so bad up here. It is
good.
like neon up here. So what you alluded earlier, Amy, to the importance of establishing a coaching program, whether it's ultra formal or not.
Right.
Why is that so important?
Because it's focused on the individual.
Yeah.
Because it really is not about the asker. It's the employee on the other side who's giving their input. Just in my little organization, we established that every month we're going to have a check-in with our direct reports. So I sit down with mine and it's a 30-minute or even sometimes just 15 minutes. And I ask 3 questions. I didn't originate these. I can't remember where they came from, honestly. What did you work on in the last month that you liked? What did you work on that you didn't really like? And what can I do to support you? The answers, cover the spectrum. They're it's very specifically not about the work. Although the work can be discussed, but you're going to find out so much more that way. And there's always interesting, so sometimes people are like, you want me to tell you what I didn't like working on? Am I really allowed to do that? Yes, I really care. I really want to hear that. And so, that's the coaching, I think, approach. Yeah. We're seeing such success. And I sometimes draw a 4-box, to talk about a little diagram to talk about the difference between coaching and mentoring. And these aren't placed high and low because of judgment about them. But coaching is really about asking. Mentoring is really about telling. It's about, sharing your experiences and offering the path that might be useful. Although my coach said to me, you can follow someone else's path if you want to end up exactly where they are. Mm-hmm. But you might want to take your own path, which I think is what's, see your strengths and success. And on the other side, of course, we have counseling, if you're really lucky, there are meds involved. Yeah. And then on the bottom, consulting, which, do you disagree?
I have said nothing. Yes.
On the bottom, consulting, which is really about, I know how to do this exactly, so here, let me tell you exactly how to follow this path. And that, there's nothing wrong with consulting either, but, for the individual, they probably would prefer to be asked.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And just to add really quick, I charge senior leaders that are here, you have coaching, you have mentoring, but, if you're 4 to 5 years on your way out to retirement, think about sponsoring. If you've been at your agency for a while and you've had an opportunity to see who the talented people are, who the promising people are, you actually have an opportunity by sponsoring. You're in executive meetings. You get to see, what the major pain points are for your organization. If there's someone who maybe isn't in your direct line of authority, but you feel has promise, you feel has a good idea, you feel has a great work ethic that you've noticed, I challenge you to sponsor them to be involved in any way. You can be creative, because that's really where you're going to see that immediate benefit. We talk about how long it takes to get talent in the door through HR. You have the opportunity to utilize talent right here in your office.
The other piece that I love about that is the connection that can have to increasing the diversity on our teams and how important that is. Another statistic that came out of that LinkedIn Learning study was training and learning is not breaking the ceiling for increasing the diversity of our teams, which means we have to do better at the connection, the sponsoring, and the mentoring in order to make that happen. And every study about higher diversity on teams equals better performance. So there's our motivation right there to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sort of summing up one potential bit of advice, I'm going to make the advice so no one else gets scolded for it. But one of the things we have to do is think about if people in our organization don't share the passion, the vision that we share, is find a way to transition them to another part of the organization. It doesn't mean they won't thrive somewhere else, but we've got to get people that share that mentality. And so really think about how to approach that. And I refuse to stand between everyone and lunch. And so while Anne may hate me for not taking a question, I'll send everyone their personal text phone numbers and you can text them and ask them questions. But I'll
Can I just stand at the back for a few?
But I believe knowing these three, if they'd be willing to share email or anything, they'd be happy to answer questions here or after the fact. We could talk for days about it, but I don't want to stand between everyone and lunch. So all I can say is thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you for being here. And
that was fun.